Long before the first cities were built, long before kings, empires, and written history, the earth belonged to giants. Across endless plains of frozen grass and towering walls of ice, creatures walked the planet that seemed almost impossible by modern standards. Mammoths as tall as houses marched through blizzards that could freeze a river in hours. Predators with blades for teeth waited silently in the snow, watching the horizon for the smallest sign of weakness. The Ice Age was not simply a colder version of the world we know today. It was a different world entirely. A world of colossal animals, brutal winters, and endless survival. Imagine standing alone on a silent, frozen plain 20,000 years ago. The wind cuts across the land like a knife. Snow drifts across the ground in ghostly waves. The sky is pale and endless. Then the ground begins to tremble. In the distance, dark shapes slowly emerge through the swirling snow. A herd of massive mammoths moves across the tundra, their curved tusks glinting in the cold light of the sun. Each step shakes the frozen earth beneath them. But they are not alone. Hidden in the shadows of the icy hills, something is watching. A predator with teeth longer than a human hand waits patiently. Its body is built for power. Its eyes never leave the herd. It has hunted this frozen land for thousands of years, and it is only one of many. The Ice Age was filled with creatures that today sound like legends. Wolves, larger than any wolf alive today, roamed in enormous packs. Bears taller than a man stood upright like living mountains. Giant sloths carried claws the size of swords. Armored beasts wandered the plains like walking fortresses. Some ruled the land. Some ruled the sky. And some were so strange that even scientists today struggle to understand them. For thousands of years, these creatures dominated the earth. They fought, hunted, migrated across continents, and survived some of the harshest conditions our planet has ever known. And then, slowly, they vanished. Their bones were buried beneath ice and soil. Their stories faded into myth. Entire species disappeared so completely that humanity would not rediscover them until tens of thousands of years later. But the Ice Age left behind clues. Frozen carcasses trapped in Siberian permafrost, gigantic skeletons hidden inside ancient caves, claw marks carved into stone that no living animal could have made. Each discovery reveals another piece of a lost world. A world where survival belonged only to the strongest. A world ruled by monsters of fur, fang, and bone. Tonight we are going to step back into that world. We will walk across the frozen plains of the last Ice Age. We will encounter the most terrifying animals that ever lived among the snow and glaciers. Some are famous, some are almost forgotten, and some may still surprise you. These are the most dangerous creatures of the Ice Age, and their story begins in a time when the Earth itself was locked in ice. Long before the modern world existed, before cities rose from the ground, and before written history recorded the rise of civilizations, the Earth entered one of the most powerful transformations in its long history. Temperatures began to fall. Year after year, the climate slowly cooled. Winters grew longer, summers became shorter and weaker. Snow that once melted in the spring began to remain on the ground for longer periods of time. At first, the changes were subtle. Forests still covered vast regions of the northern continents. Rivers still flowed freely across the land. But over thousands of years, the cold continued to grow stronger. Glaciers slowly formed in the far north. These enormous rivers of ice began creeping southward, inch by inch, century after century. Mountains disappeared beneath white sheets of frozen water. Entire valleys were swallowed by expanding walls of ice that grew thicker than the tallest skyscrapers of the modern world. Eventually, much of the northern hemisphere became locked in a frozen grip. This was the beginning of what scientists now call the Ice Age. During this time, the landscape of Earth looked dramatically different from the one we know today. Huge portions of North America, Europe, and Asia were covered by vast ice sheets that stretched for thousands of kilometers. In some places, the ice was more than 3 kilometers thick. But beyond the edges of these glaciers, a strange and beautiful world emerged. Instead of forests, enormous open plains stretched across the continents. These plains were covered with hardy grasses, small shrubs, and frozen soil that remained locked in frost for most of the year. Scientists call this environment the mammoth steppe. It was one of the largest ecosystems the Earth has ever known, and it would become the stage for some of the most extraordinary animals that ever lived. The winds that swept across the mammoth steppe were cold and relentless. Blizzards could appear without warning, covering the ground with deep snow in a matter of hours. Only the strongest creatures could survive here. Animals that lived in this world had to adapt to brutal winters, scarce food, and constant danger. Over time, evolution began to shape them into forms perfectly suited for life in the frozen wilderness. Many of them grew enormous. Large bodies helped retain heat in the freezing climate. Thick fur protected them from the icy winds. Layers of fat provided energy during long winters when food became difficult to find. Slowly, generation after generation, a new caste of creatures emerged across the Ice Age plains. Among the most famous was the mighty woolly mammoth. These towering animals were distant relatives of modern elephants, but they were far better adapted to the cold world of the Ice Age. Their bodies were covered in thick, shaggy fur that hung in long strands. Beneath that fur was a dense undercoat and a heavy layer of insulating fat. Their enormous, curved tusks could grow more than 4 meters long, sweeping forward in graceful arcs that made them one of the most recognizable animals of the prehistoric world. Herds of mammoths traveled slowly across the frozen plains, searching for grasses buried beneath the snow. Each step of these giants pressed deep tracks into the icy ground. For thousands of years, they were among the true rulers of the mammoth steppe. But the mammoths were far from alone. Across the plains roamed massive herds of another powerful animal, the steppe bison. These ancient bison were larger and heavier than the bison that still survive today in North America. Their bodies were built like living fortresses, with powerful shoulders and thick fur that allowed them to endure freezing storms that would kill most animals. When thousands of them moved together across the plains, the ground could tremble beneath their hooves. For predators, these herds represented both opportunity and danger, because hidden among the rolling hills and frozen valleys of the Ice Age lived hunters unlike anything the modern world has ever seen. One of the most terrifying was the legendary Smilodon. At first glance, it resembled a powerful lion, but its most striking feature was impossible to ignore. From its upper jaw extended 2 enormous curved teeth, each one longer than a human hand. These were not ordinary teeth. They were carefully evolved weapons designed for delivering precise and devastating killing bites. A single strike from those blades could bring down animals far larger than the cat itself. Unlike modern big cats that often hunt alone, evidence suggests that some saber-toothed cats may have hunted in groups, working together to bring down large prey across the frozen plains. And they were not the only predators watching the mammoth steppe. Moving silently through the twilight hours was another powerful hunter, the dire wolf. These wolves were larger and more heavily built than the gray wolves that exist today. Their jaws were stronger, their bodies more muscular, and their packs may have numbered in the dozens. A lone animal crossing the frozen plains could quickly find itself surrounded by silent shadows, closing in from every direction. Even the skies above the Ice Age landscape were not always safe. Large scavenger birds circled high above the plains, watching for the aftermath of hunts or the bodies of animals that had succumbed to the unforgiving winter. Every creature that lived in this world was part of an enormous and complex web of survival. Herbivores moved constantly in search of food. Predators followed the herds, waiting for weakness or opportunity. Storms reshaped the land, burying grasses beneath deep snow or exposing new feeding grounds. Life during the Ice Age was never easy, but it was magnificent. The frozen plains stretched endlessly toward the horizon, glowing pale beneath the weak sunlight of a cold world. Herds of giant animals moved slowly through drifting snow, their breath rising into the icy air like clouds of steam. And somewhere nearby, unseen eyes were always watching. The Ice Age was not just a time of cold, it was a time of giants. Creatures of incredible size, strength, and strangeness walked the earth during these thousands of years. Some would become legends, discovered only through fossil bones buried deep beneath the ground. Others would remain almost completely forgotten. But together, they formed one of the most fascinating chapters in the history of life on our planet. And as the frozen world continued to expand, the age of these powerful animals was only just beginning. Because far to the north, enormous glaciers were still moving, and with them, the Ice Age was preparing to unleash even more extraordinary creatures onto the ancient plains of Earth. As the Ice Age tightened its grip on the northern half of the planet, the frozen plains of the mammoth steppe expanded across continents. The cold winds that swept through this vast world rarely stopped moving. They carried fine snow across the land in endless drifting waves and sculpted the ground into rolling white ridges that stretched as far as the eye could see. To most forms of life, this environment would have been unbearable. The winters were long and dark. Temperatures plunged far below freezing for months at a time. Food was often buried beneath thick layers of snow and ice. Yet in this harsh world, some of the most remarkable animals in Earth's history thrived. Among them stood one of the true icons of the Ice Age, the mighty woolly mammoth. A fully grown mammoth was an extraordinary sight. Adults could stand over 4 meters tall at the shoulder, towering above almost every other creature of the frozen plains. Their massive bodies were wrapped in long, shaggy fur that swung gently in the wind as they walked. Beneath that fur was a dense underlayer of wool that trapped heat close to the skin. Even deeper was a thick layer of fat that helped protect them from temperatures that could drop below -40 degrees. Their heads were crowned with enormous curved tusks that could grow longer than a man was tall. These tusks were not only impressive weapons, they were tools that allowed mammoths to dig through snow and ice in search of the grasses hidden below. Across the mammoth steppe, herds of these giants moved slowly across the land like living mountains. Most herds were led by experienced females, much like modern elephants. These matriarchs carried the memory of the land within them. They remembered the safest migration routes, the hidden valleys where the wind exposed grasses during winter, and the distant rivers that still flowed beneath layers of ice. Young mammoths stayed close to the center of the herd, where they were protected from danger. Calves were curious and playful, often seen running clumsily through the snow, while older members watched carefully. But life on the frozen plains was never peaceful for long. Predators constantly followed the great herds. Some hunters waited silently for a mammoth calf to stray too far from its family. Others searched for older animals weakened by age or injury, and sometimes even the largest mammoths had to defend themselves. When danger approached, The herd could quickly form a protective circle around its youngest members. The adults faced outward, with their massive tusks lowered, ready to confront whatever threat dared come too close. For many predators, attacking a healthy mammoth herd was simply too dangerous. But the mammoths were not the only giants roaming the steppe. Sharing the frozen plains with them were enormous herds of steppe bison. These powerful animals were among the most abundant herbivores of the Ice Age. Their bodies were broad and muscular, with thick necks and enormous shoulders built for pushing through deep snow and resisting the force of winter storms. A mature steppe bison could weigh nearly a ton. Unlike mammoths, which moved in smaller family groups, bison often gathered in massive herds that could stretch across the horizon. Thousands of animals could migrate together across the grasslands, their hooves pounding against the frozen earth. When such a herd moved across the plains, the sound could carry for kilometers through the cold air. To the predators of the Ice Age, these herds represented both opportunity and risk. Among the hunters that watched them carefully was the powerful Smilodon. This famous predator is often imagined as a solitary hunter, stalking silently through tall grass. But the reality may have been even more fascinating. Evidence from fossil sites suggests that some saber-toothed cats may have lived in social groups. Injured individuals appear to have survived long after wounds that would have prevented them from hunting alone. This hints that these predators may have supported one another, sharing food within a group, much like modern lions. When hunting large prey, such as bison, cooperation would have been extremely valuable. A group of saber-toothed cats could surround a herd, waiting patiently for the moment when one animal became separated or slowed by exhaustion. Then the attack would begin. Unlike modern cats that rely heavily on suffocating their prey, saber-toothed cats used their enormous teeth to deliver precise and devastating strikes to soft areas of the body. Their powerful forelimbs helped them wrestle struggling prey to the ground, while those long curved fangs delivered the final blow. Yet even these terrifying hunters had competition. Moving across the same plains in organized packs were the formidable dire wolf. These wolves were not only larger than modern wolves, but also built for endurance. Their strong legs allowed them to travel great distances while tracking migrating herds. Dire wolves relied on teamwork more than brute strength. A pack could spread out across the landscape, quietly closing the distance around their target. Once the chase began, their stamina allowed them to pursue prey over long distances until exhaustion finally slowed the victim. Sometimes their hunts overlapped with those of saber-toothed cats. In those moments, the frozen plains could become a battleground between rival predators. A carcass on the Ice Age steppe rarely remained unchallenged for long. If a pack of wolves brought down a bison, saber-toothed cats might attempt to drive them away. If a saber-toothed cat killed a large animal, wolves could gather in numbers to steal the meal. The frozen plains were a place of constant tension, where strength, cooperation, and patience all played crucial roles in survival. And yet, despite the violence that sometimes erupted between predators, the mammoth steppe remained a thriving ecosystem. Countless smaller animals lived among the grasses and shrubs. Arctic foxes hunted rodents beneath the snow. Hares darted across the frozen ground, leaving delicate tracks that quickly vanished beneath drifting snow. Above them, the northern sky stretched wide and pale, often glowing with the shimmering curtains of the aurora. Under that sky, the giants of the Ice Age continued their endless migrations. Mammoth herds marched slowly across the tundra in search of buried grasses. Bison herds thundered across the plains in massive waves of muscle and fur. Predators followed quietly behind them, waiting for the moment when survival would once again demand violence. This frozen world was harsh beyond imagination. But for the creatures that had evolved to live here, it was home. And hidden in the shadows of distant hills, Even more powerful and mysterious animals were preparing to enter the story of the Ice Age. Some of them would become the most feared hunters the frozen Earth had ever known. On the frozen plains of the Ice Age, survival was rarely peaceful. The great herds of mammoths and bison moved slowly across the mammoth steppe, their migrations shaping the rhythm of life across thousands of kilometers. Wherever the herds traveled, predators followed. The hunters of this world lived by patience. They studied the movements of the giants. They learned the paths herds used during winter migrations. They waited through storms and long nights of freezing wind, knowing that eventually weakness would appear. Among all the predators that walked the frozen plains, few were as legendary as the fearsome Smilodon. To modern eyes, this creature might resemble a powerful lion, but the similarities end there. Smilodon possessed features unlike any big cat alive today. Its body was shorter and heavier than that of a lion, built with thick muscles and powerful shoulders, designed for grappling large prey. But it was the teeth that made this predator unforgettable. From its upper jaw extended two enormous saber-shaped fangs. Each tooth could reach nearly 20 centimeters in length. When the mouth opened fully, these blades pointed downward like polished ivory daggers. For centuries, scientists have debated how such extreme weapons were used. Unlike the teeth of wolves or lions, the fangs of Smilodon were surprisingly delicate. They were not designed to withstand the crushing forces of bone-breaking bites. Instead, they were specialized tools for delivering precise killing strikes. To use them effectively required control and strength. Fossil skeletons show that Smilodon had exceptionally powerful forelimbs. Its arms were thicker than those of modern lions and ended in large, curved claws, capable of gripping struggling prey. A typical hunt may have unfolded in quiet silence. A group of saber-toothed cats would hide within the tall grasses or behind low ridges of frozen earth. Their thick coats blended perfectly with the pale winter landscape. From a distance, they were nearly invisible. They watched the movement of a herd. Perhaps a young bison wandered slightly too far from the others. Perhaps an injured animal lagged behind after a long migration. The hunters would wait until the perfect moment. Then they would rush forward with explosive speed. Unlike wolves that relied on endurance, Smilodon depended on sudden power. The cats aimed to bring their prey down quickly before it could escape or fight back effectively. Once a target was reached, the powerful forelimbs wrapped around the animal's body. With remarkable strength, the predator would pull its prey off balance and drive it to the ground. Only then would the famous fangs come into play. The jaws opened wide. The curved blades descended into the vulnerable areas of the neck or throat, where major blood vessels lay close to the surface. It was a precise and deadly technique. A successful strike could bring down animals far larger than the hunter itself. For thousands of years, this strategy allowed saber-toothed cats to dominate many Ice Age ecosystems. But Smilodon was not the only member of this remarkable family of predators. Another species, equally fascinating and perhaps even more mysterious, shared the frozen world of the mammoth steppe. This hunter was known as Homotherium. At first glance, Homotherium appeared somewhat similar to Smilodon. It, too, possessed long, saber-like teeth and powerful limbs. Yet its body was built differently. Homotherium had longer legs and a leaner frame, suggesting it was better suited for running across open terrain. Its teeth were also shaped differently. Instead of the long, curved blades of Smilodon, Homotherium possessed shorter but serrated teeth that resembled the edge of a scimitar sword. These features hint at a different hunting style. While Smilodon may have favored ambush attacks from concealment, Homotherium may have relied more on pursuit and teamwork in open landscapes. Some fossil evidence suggests that Homotherium lived in social groups. Entire collections of skeletons have been discovered together, indicating that these predators may have hunted cooperatively. Imagine a group of these powerful cats spreading across the frozen plains. Their eyes lock onto a distant herd of bison or young mammoths. The cats begin to move slowly, spreading out across the landscape so that escape routes gradually disappear. Then the chase begins. With long strides, the predators close the distance. Their stamina allows them to pursue prey across open ground where ambush is impossible. If the herd panics and scatters, one unlucky individual may find itself surrounded. In the harsh mathematics of survival, that single animal becomes the difference between hunger and life for the hunters. The Ice Age landscape was filled with such dramatic encounters. Predators competed constantly for territory and food. Sometimes different species crossed paths in tense standoffs over fresh kills. A saber-toothed cat guarding its prey might suddenly find a pack of wolves approaching from the darkness. A group of homotherium might encounter a rival predator already feeding on a fallen bison. In these moments, the frozen plains could become arenas of silent intimidation. Growls echoed across the snow, muscles tensed beneath thick fur. Each predator weighed the risks of confrontation against the reward of a meal. Often the confrontation ended without violence. The losing side would retreat, disappearing into the endless white landscape in search of easier opportunities. But not always. The Ice Age was a time when even the strongest hunters could be injured or killed during desperate struggles for food. And beyond the conflicts between predators, there were even greater forces shaping the lives of these animals. Storms could sweep across the plains with terrifying speed. Blinding snow and freezing winds could erase entire herds from sight in minutes. Americans caught unprepared could freeze before morning arrived. Food supplies changed constantly as shifting climates altered the vegetation of the mammoth steppe. Every creature in this frozen world had to remain alert. Even the mighty saber-toothed cats lived under constant pressure to hunt successfully and protect their territory. Yet, despite these dangers, the predators of the Ice Age continued to thrive for thousands of years. They were the masters of a world shaped by ice and survival. But beyond the Great Plains and the migrating herds, another group of hunters was slowly becoming more powerful. These animals did not rely on ambush or sudden bursts of speed. They relied on numbers. They relied on coordination. And when they howled beneath the frozen sky, their voices carried across the plains like a warning that the hunt was about to begin. When night fell across the mammoth steppe, the frozen plains became quieter. The great herds of mammoths gathered close together, their massive bodies forming protective circles against the cold wind. Bison lowered their heads and rested in the shallow depressions they had carved into the snow. Even many predators disappeared into sheltered valleys where rocky cliffs could block the worst of the storm. But the darkness did not belong to silence alone. Far across the open land, a sound often rose into the cold air. It began as a single, distant call. Then another answered. Soon a chorus of deep, powerful howls rolled across the frozen plains like waves of sound carried by the wind. Those voices belonged to one of the most successful predators of the Ice Age, the formidable direwolf. To someone standing on the mammoth steppe 20,000 years ago, hearing those howls would have been both beautiful and terrifying. The direwolf looked similar to the gray wolves that still exist today, but the resemblance hid important differences. These ancient wolves were heavier, broader, and built with powerful jaws capable of crushing bone. An adult direwolf could weigh nearly 70 kilograms, making it significantly larger than most modern wolves. Their skulls were thicker, their teeth stronger, and their bodies designed for endurance rather than speed alone. But the greatest strength of these animals did not lie in their size. It lay in their unity. Direwolves lived and hunted in highly organized packs. A single wolf could bring down only small prey, but a coordinated pack could challenge animals many times their own size. The frozen plains demanded cooperation. Food was never guaranteed. Storms could wipe out entire herds or drive them far beyond the reach of hungry predators. In such an environment, wolves that worked together had a much better chance of survival. A pack might contain a dozen members, sometimes more. Each wolf understood its place within the group. Some were older and experienced hunters that helped guide the pack's movements. Others were younger and stronger individuals, capable of chasing prey across great distances. When the wolves traveled across the mammoth steppe, they moved with quiet discipline. Their paws were wide and well adapted for snow, allowing them to travel across frozen ground without sinking too deeply. Their thick coats protected them from the relentless wind that swept across the plains. And their senses were extraordinary. A wolf's nose could detect the scent of animals many kilometers away, carried faintly by the cold air. A distant herd of bison moving across the tundra might leave a trail invisible to human eyes, but obvious to a pack of experienced hunters. Once the wolves located prey, the real strategy began. Unlike the ambush predators of the Ice Age, wolves depended on persistence. The pack spread across the landscape, sometimes moving in a wide arc to position themselves around a herd. They did not rush immediately into the attack. Instead, they waited. They watched the herd carefully, searching for signs of weakness. An injured animal, a young calf separated from its mother, a member of the herd that had grown tired during a long migration. When such an opportunity appeared, the wolves acted quickly. Several members of the pack might begin the chase, while others moved ahead to cut off possible escape routes. The wolves worked together, almost like a living machine, each individual responding to the movements of the others. The chase could last for many minutes, sometimes even longer. Most large animals could run faster than wolves for short distances, but wolves possessed one crucial advantage: endurance. Their bodies were built to run for long periods of time without tiring quickly. As the chase continued, the prey gradually became exhausted. Its breathing grew heavier. Its movements slowed. That was when the pack closed in. The wolves circled their target, darting forward to bite at the legs or flanks before quickly retreating to avoid powerful kicks or horns. One wolf alone might be killed by a desperate bison, but a pack working together could slowly wear down even a massive animal. Eventually, the prey would stumble, and in the brutal mathematics of survival on the Ice Age plains, that moment decided everything. The wolves would swarm forward as one, yet even these skilled hunters did not always succeed. Sometimes the prey escaped into deep snow, where wolves struggled to keep pace. Sometimes a herd of bison formed a defensive wall of horns and muscle that no predator could safely challenge. And sometimes the wolves encountered competitors. The mammoth steppe was filled with rival predators, each searching for the same precious resource. A pack of wolves feeding on a fresh kill might suddenly find themselves confronted by powerful intruders. The most dangerous of these were the massive cave hyenas, known as cave hyena. These animals were larger and stronger than modern hyenas. Their jaws were among the most powerful of any mammal, capable of crushing even thick bones to reach the nutritious marrow inside. Unlike the scavenger reputation often associated with hyenas today, cave hyenas were formidable hunters in their own right. They traveled in groups and were not easily intimidated. If a clan of hyenas discovered a carcass already claimed by wolves, a tense confrontation could unfold beneath the frozen sky. The wolves would stand their ground, growling deeply, while their thick fur bristled in the cold wind. Across the snow, the hyenas would respond with eerie laughing calls and snapping jaws. Both sides understood the risk. Injury during winter could easily lead to death. Sometimes the wolves backed away, allowing the bone-crushing hyenas to claim the remains of the kill. Other times the wolves stood firm, and the hyenas chose to search elsewhere. Such encounters were a normal part of life on the mammoth steppe. The frozen plains were not ruled by a single predator. Instead, they were shared by many powerful hunters, each carving out its own place within the harsh ecosystem of the Ice Age. And yet, even these skilled hunters were not the largest carnivores walking the frozen world. Far to the north, within the shadowed entrances of enormous caves carved into ancient mountains, another creature waited. It was larger than any wolf, stronger than any saber-toothed cat, and when it rose onto its hind legs, it could tower above a human like a living wall of fur and muscle. The age of the wolves had come, but the age of the giants had only just begun. Far from the open plains where mammoths marched and wolves howled beneath the frozen sky, another world existed in the shadow of the Ice Age. This world was quiet. Massive mountain ranges rose like frozen fortresses above the tundra. Their rocky slopes were carved by glaciers and scarred by centuries of relentless wind. Snow gathered in deep drifts between jagged cliffs, and narrow valleys twisted through the landscape like frozen corridors. Hidden within these mountains were enormous caves. Some stretched deep into the earth for hundreds of meters. Their entrances were often dark and silent, guarded by towering stone arches formed long before the Ice Age began. To early humans wandering the frozen wilderness, these caves were places of mystery and danger. Many of them belonged to one of the most powerful animals of the Ice Age, the enormous cave bear. At first glance, a cave bear might resemble the brown bears that still roam parts of the world today. But the similarities only hint at the true scale of this prehistoric giant. An adult cave bear could weigh more than 1,000 kilograms. When standing on all four legs, it was already an impressive sight. But when the animal rose onto its hind legs, as bears often do when investigating their surroundings, it could reach a height of nearly 3.5 meters. Imagine a wall of muscle and fur towering above the frozen ground, its massive head turning slowly as it surveys the land. It is easy to understand why early humans may have feared and respected these creatures. The cave bear possessed a skull unlike any other bear. Its forehead rose high and steep, giving the animal a powerful and almost ancient appearance. Beneath that skull were enormous jaws, capable of crushing vegetation, roots, and sometimes meat when opportunity allowed. Despite their massive size, many cave bears were primarily herbivores. Their diet likely consisted mostly of plants, berries, grasses, and roots that grew during the brief summers of the Ice Age. But even a mostly plant-eating animal could be extremely dangerous. A startled cave bear defending its territory or protecting its cubs was a force that few predators dared challenge. Throughout the frozen landscapes of Europe and parts of Asia, cave bears spent much of their lives moving between feeding grounds and the caves that gave them their name. During the warmer months, they roamed across mountain slopes and forest edges, searching for food and building up the thick layers of fat needed to survive the brutal winters. When the cold season returned, many of them retreated deep into caves to hibernate. Inside these dark chambers, the bears would sleep for months, their breathing slow and steady, while blizzards raged across the mountains outside. Over thousands of years, countless generations of cave bears used the same shelters. Their bones accumulated within these caves in astonishing numbers. In some places, scientists have discovered entire chambers filled with skulls and skeletons, silent evidence of how many of these animals once lived across the Ice Age world. For other predators, the caves of these bears were places to avoid. A hungry pack of wolves might cross the plains without fear of most creatures, But few wolves would willingly enter a cave where a giant bear might awaken from its sleep. Even the famous saber-toothed cats preferred easier targets. But the presence of cave bears created unexpected opportunities for smaller animals. When bears abandoned caves after long winters, other creatures sometimes moved in. Hyenas, foxes, and even early humans occasionally used these shelters to escape the worst storms of the Ice Age. Yet sharing the landscape with such enormous neighbors was never simple. Encounters between cave bears and other animals could be unpredictable. Imagine a cold spring morning high in the mountains. The snow's begun to melt in narrow streams that trickle down rocky slopes. A lone predator, perhaps a wandering smilodon, moves carefully through the quiet forest at the edge of the mountains. The cat searches for prey weakened by the long winter. Then the forest suddenly grows silent. Birds scatter from the branches, small animals vanish into hidden burrows. A massive shape emerges from between the trees. A cave bear, recently awakened from hibernation, stands blinking in the pale sunlight. For the saber-toothed cat, this is not a hunt. It is a warning. Even the most dangerous predators of the Ice Age understood the difference between prey and disaster. The cat retreats silently, disappearing back into the forest shadows. Across the Ice Age landscape, the presence of giant bears shaped the behavior of many animals. Their size alone allowed them to dominate certain regions without needing to hunt aggressively. Yet the frozen world was constantly changing. As glaciers advanced and retreated, forests shifted across the continents. New feeding grounds appeared, while others vanished beneath expanding ice. Animals that once lived comfortably in one region sometimes found themselves forced to migrate in search of better conditions. The cave bears were powerful, but even giants could not control the climate of the planet. Meanwhile, beyond the mountains and caves, the open plains of the mammoth steppe continued to thrive with life. Herds of mammoths and bison still traveled across the frozen grasslands. Wolves continued their endless hunts beneath the northern sky. But not all the giants of the Ice Age were slow-moving herbivores or cave-dwelling bears. Far across the western continents, another creature was roaming the frozen plains. This predator was even larger than most bears. It was faster than one might expect for an animal of its size, and when it walked across the land, it carried the presence of something almost mythical. A hunter so enormous that many scientists believe it may have been the most powerful land predator of the Ice Age. The short-faced giant of the frozen world was already on the move. Across the western lands of the Ice Age, far beyond the caves of Europe and the endless mammoth plains of northern Asia, another giant ruled the wilderness. This creature did not live quietly inside mountain shelters. It walked openly across the landscape like a moving mountain. It was one of the most powerful predators the Ice Age ever produced. The enormous Arctidus. Today, scientists often call this animal the short-faced bear, but the name can be misleading. When standing beside other bears, its face was not truly short. Instead, its skull was tall and broad, giving the animal a slightly different appearance compared with modern bears. What truly made Arctidus remarkable was its size. This bear was immense. A large male could weigh well over 900 kilograms. When walking on all fours, its shoulders stood higher than those of many horses. When the animal rose onto its hind legs, which bears often do to investigate scents carried by the wind, it could reach a height approaching 4 meters. Imagine standing on the frozen plains and watching such a creature rise above the grass and snow. Its shadow would stretch across the land like the silhouette of a giant. But Arctidus was not just large. Its body was built differently from most other bears. Many modern bears are powerful, but somewhat slow-moving animals. They rely on bursts of strength rather than long-distance travel. Arctidus appears to have been built for something else entirely. Its legs were unusually long for a bear. Its body proportions suggest an animal capable of moving quickly across open ground. Some scientists believe this giant could travel great distances in search of food, covering vast areas of territory across the Ice Age landscape. That ability would have been extremely valuable. The mammoth steppe and the plains of ancient North America were enormous ecosystems. Herds of animals constantly migrated as seasons changed and food sources shifted. A predator that could travel far and detect opportunities across large distances would have a powerful advantage. Arctodus likely possessed an extraordinary sense of smell, even by the standards of modern bears. The cold air of the Ice Age carried scents across kilometers of open terrain. A carcass left behind by wolves or saber-toothed cats might be detected long before the hunters finished feeding. When the giant bear arrived, the balance of power often changed instantly. Imagine a pack of direwolf feeding on the body of a fallen bison. The wolves have worked hard for this meal. The hunt may have lasted half an hour or longer as they chased the animal across the frozen ground. Now they tear into the thick hide, finally gaining the reward for their effort. Then the wind shifts. One of the wolves lifts its head. A new scent drifts across the plain. Moments later, the wolves notice movement in the distance. At first, it is only a dark shape walking slowly across the snow. But as it grows closer, the size of the intruder becomes clear. The wolves know immediately what it is: Arctodus. A single bear could weigh more than an entire pack of wolves combined. The wolves begin to growl and bark, forming a loose circle around the carcass. They snap their jaws and attempt to appear intimidating. But the giant bear keeps walking. It does not hurry. It does not seem concerned. When it finally reaches the carcass, the bear rises slightly onto its hind legs and inhales deeply, confirming what its nose already told it: food. The wolves understand the situation. They could attack, but the risk would be enormous. A single, powerful swipe from the bear's massive forelimb could break bones or kill instantly. Slowly, reluctantly, the wolves begin to retreat. The bear lowers its head and begins to feed. Scenes like this may have occurred countless times across the Ice Age plains. For many predators, the arrival of Arctodus meant the end of a meal they had worked hard to obtain. This has led some scientists to believe that the short-faced bear may have been a dominant scavenger rather than an active hunter. Its immense size would have allowed it to intimidate other predators and steal their kills with relatively little effort. Yet other researchers argue that such a powerful animal must also have hunted at times. With its long legs and incredible strength, Arctodus could potentially pursue weakened animals across open terrain or ambush prey near river crossings and migration paths. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Like many large carnivores, the short-faced bear likely used whatever strategy offered the best chance of survival. Sometimes it hunted, sometimes it scavenged. Always, it dominated the landscape wherever it appeared. But even a giant like Arctodus did not live alone in the Ice Age world. Across the frozen plains and ancient grasslands of the continents, other remarkable animals thrived alongside it. One of the most spectacular was not a predator at all. Instead, it was a creature of incredible beauty and size, an animal whose enormous antlers spread across the sky like the branches of a living tree. This was the majestic Megaloceros, often called the giant deer or the Irish elk. A fully grown Megaloceros was an astonishing sight. Standing nearly 2 meters tall at the shoulder, the animal already rivaled the largest modern deer. But it was the antlers that made it truly unforgettable. From the head of an adult male extended an enormous rack of bone that could span more than 3.5 meters from tip to tip. These antlers were among the largest ever carried by any deer in Earth's history. During the mating season, males used them in dramatic contests for dominance. Two rivals would lower their heads and clash together with a thunderous sound that echoed across the plains. The battles could last several minutes as each animal pushed with all its strength, attempting to force the other backward. Such contests were dangerous. The massive antlers could become tangled, and exhaustion sometimes led to injuries that predators would later exploit. Yet the spectacle of these battles must have been extraordinary to witness. Across the Ice Age world, the lives of predators and herbivores remained closely intertwined. Where herds gathered, hunters followed. Where hunters fought over territory, opportunities arose for scavengers. The frozen landscape was a complex web of survival, competition, and adaptation. And even as these giants thrived, the Ice Age continued to produce creatures stranger and more surprising than anyone could imagine. Some of them looked almost impossible. Animals with armor like living tanks, creatures with claws longer than swords, beasts so unusual that if they appeared in the modern world, many people might believe they had stepped out of myth. The frozen age of giants was far from finished. Across the frozen plains and cold grasslands of the Ice Age, enormous herds moved slowly beneath the pale northern sky. Mammoths marched across the mammoth steppe in family groups. Bison thundered across the tundra in vast migrations that stretched beyond the horizon. But among all the herbivores that lived during this ancient era, one creature stood out as a symbol of strange beauty and extraordinary scale. This animal was the magnificent Megaloceros. Today it is sometimes called the Irish elk, though it was not truly an elk and it lived far beyond Ireland. Fossils of this incredible deer have been discovered across much of Europe and parts of Asia, revealing that it once roamed enormous territories during the Ice Age. To encounter one of these animals on the frozen plains would have been an unforgettable sight. A fully grown male Megaloceros stood nearly 2 meters tall at the shoulder. Its body was lean yet powerful, built for endurance as it traveled across open landscapes in search of food. But the feature that made this deer truly legendary was its antlers. From the skull of an adult male extended a vast crown of bone that could reach more than 3.5 meters from one tip to the other. Each antler branched outward in wide, sweeping blades that resembled the spreading limbs of a tree. When the animal walked beneath the open sky, those antlers seemed almost like a living forest rising above its head. Carrying such enormous structures required great strength. The neck muscles of Megaloceros were extremely powerful, allowing the animal to support the heavy antlers while moving through the landscape. During certain seasons, those antlers grew rapidly, fueled by the rich grasses and plants that appeared during the short Ice Age summers. Every year, the cycle repeated. The antlers would grow to their full, magnificent size, serving as tools for competition and display. Then, after the mating season ended, they would eventually fall away, only to grow again during the following year. This cycle created one of the most dramatic spectacles of the prehistoric world. When the breeding season arrived, male giant deer gathered across the open plains to compete for dominance. The air filled with deep calls as rivals challenged one another for the right to mate. Soon, the battles began. Two enormous stags would approach cautiously at first, their heads lowered as they studied one another across the grass and frost-covered ground. Then, suddenly, they charged. The impact of their antlers colliding echoed across the plains like the crack of breaking wood. The great racks of bone locked together as both animals pushed with every ounce of strength they possessed. Muscles strained, hooves dug deep into the frozen earth. For several tense moments, the two giants struggled in a contest of endurance and power. Eventually, one stag would lose its footing or tire. The victor forced his opponent backward until the defeated animal broke away and fled. The winner remained behind, standing tall beneath the cold sky, with his enormous antlers spread wide in triumph. Yet these impressive weapons carried risks as well. The massive antlers that made Megaloceros so striking could also make life difficult in certain environments. Dense forests were hard to navigate with such wide racks of bone, which is one reason these animals preferred open grasslands and lightly wooded areas. Even in open terrain, the antlers could sometimes become entangled during combat. If two rivals locked their antlers too tightly, they might struggle to free themselves. In rare cases, such battles could end tragically, leaving both animals trapped together until exhaustion or predators claimed them. Predators were always watching. Across the mammoth steppe and the grassy valleys of Ice Age Europe, the lives of giant deer were closely observed by hunters searching for opportunity. One of the most dangerous of those hunters was the powerful Homotherium. Unlike the ambush tactics used by some other predators, Homotherium was likely adapted for pursuit across open ground. Its long legs and endurance made it well suited for chasing prey across the wide plains where giant deer often traveled. A group of these cats might quietly observe a herd of Megaloceros from a distance. Most members of the herd were healthy adults capable of defending themselves with sharp hooves and powerful kicks. Attacking one of these animals directly could be dangerous, but weakness occasionally appeared. A young deer separated from the herd. An older male weakened after exhausting battles during the mating season, or an injured animal struggling to keep pace during migration. When such an opportunity emerged, the hunters acted quickly. The cats spread across the landscape, slowly narrowing the distance around their chosen target. Once the chase began, the deer relied on speed and agility to escape across the plains. For a moment, the contest became a race between two extraordinary creatures of the Ice Age. The deer bounded across the frozen ground, its massive antlers swaying with each stride. Behind it, the predators ran with relentless determination, their eyes fixed on the fleeing animal. Sometimes the deer escaped into dense terrain where the cats could not follow easily. Sometimes exhaustion decided the outcome. Such dramatic encounters were part of the endless cycle of life on the frozen plains. But predators did not only hunt deer. Across the landscape, many other unusual animals shared the same ecosystem. Some of them looked so strange that they would seem almost unbelievable to modern eyes. One such creature resembled a giant walking fortress. Its body was covered in thick armor made of interlocking plates of bone. Its tail ended in a heavy club capable of delivering devastating blows to any predator foolish enough to attack. This remarkable animal was the Glyptodon. At first glance, Glyptodon looked almost like an enormous armadillo the size of a small car. Its shell formed a solid, protective dome across its back, making it extremely difficult for predators to harm. While giant deer relied on speed and awareness to escape danger, Glyptodon relied on armor and patience. Predators such as wolves or saber-toothed cats often found these animals frustratingly difficult to attack. Their thick, protective shells left very few vulnerable areas exposed. And if a predator approached too closely, the heavy tail club could swing with surprising force. Across the Ice Age world, evolution had produced an astonishing variety of survival strategies. Some animals relied on speed, some relied on strength, some relied on cooperation, and some, like the armored giants of the plains, relied on defense so formidable that even the most powerful predators hesitated before attacking. The frozen age of giants was a place of constant adaptation and competition. Every creature, from the smallest fox to the largest mammoth, was shaped by the unforgiving demands of the Ice Age. And yet, even among these remarkable animals, stranger beings still waited to appear. Far to the south, in warmer regions where forests and open grasslands met, a creature walked that seemed almost impossible. It stood upright like a towering shadow. Its claws were longer than knives, and despite its slow appearance, it possessed the strength to challenge almost anything that dared to threaten it. The next chapter of the Ice Age would reveal one of the most mysterious giants of all. Not all of the giants of the Ice Age were swift hunters or animals built for speed. Some were slow, some were quiet, and some looked so unusual that, if they were alive today, many people might mistake them for creatures from myth. Across the warmer regions of the Ice Age world, especially in parts of North and South America where forests and grasslands mixed together, a remarkable group of animals walked the earth. These animals were enormous, relatives of the sloths that today live quietly in tropical trees, but their ancient ancestors were something entirely different. Among the most astonishing of them was the colossal Megatherium. To imagine this creature, one must first forget everything familiar about modern sloths. Megatherium did not cling to branches high in the forest canopy. It did not move slowly through trees while hanging upside down. Instead, it walked on the ground, and it was enormous. A fully grown Megatherium could reach the size of a modern elephant. When standing on all four legs, its massive body stretched across the land like a moving hill of fur and muscle. But the true scale of the animal became clear when it rose onto its hind legs. Ground sloths possessed powerful hind limbs and thick tails that could support their weight like a living tripod. When Megatherium stood upright, it could reach heights of more than 6 meters. From this towering position, the animal could easily pull branches from tall trees or strip leaves from vegetation that most other herbivores could never reach. Its enormous claws were among the most striking features of its body. Each forelimb carried long, curved claws that could grow more than 30 centimeters in length. These claws were perfectly designed for pulling down branches, digging for roots, and defending the animal against predators. When the claws were raised, they looked less like tools and more like weapons. Despite their intimidating appearance, giant ground sloths were primarily herbivores. They fed on leaves, shrubs, and low tree branches, slowly moving through forests and open grasslands in search of food. Their pace was calm and deliberate. Megatherium did not need speed to survive. Its sheer size alone discouraged most predators from attacking. But the Ice Age world was full of hunters that constantly searched for opportunities. Even an enormous animal could become vulnerable if it was young, injured, or separated from safer areas of the forest. In those rare moments, the ground sloth revealed just how powerful it truly was. Imagine a hungry smilodon approaching cautiously through the grass. The predator studies the towering animal carefully. It circles at a distance, searching for a weakness. Then the sloth senses movement. Slowly, it rises onto its hind legs. The massive claws lift into the air like curved blades. Muscles ripple beneath thick fur as the giant animal balances itself effortlessly on its powerful legs and tail. In that moment, the sloth becomes a towering wall of muscle and bone. A single swing of those claws could inflict devastating wounds on any predator foolish enough to attack. For most hunters, the message was clear. This was not an easy meal, and so the predator retreats into the grass, leaving the giant herbivore to continue its slow journey across the landscape. Megatherium was not the only giant sloth that lived during the Ice Age. Another fascinating species shared the forests and grasslands of ancient South America. This animal was the slightly smaller but equally impressive Mylodon. Mylodon possessed thick fur and a powerful body that allowed it to survive the cooler climates of southern regions. Unlike its larger cousin, it often lived in areas where rocky caves and sheltered valleys provided protection from harsh weather. Some of the most extraordinary discoveries of the Ice Age involved this species. In certain caves in South America, scientists have discovered remarkably well-preserved remains of Mylodon. Pieces of skin, fur, and even dried dung have survived for thousands of years, offering rare glimpses into the life of these ancient animals. These discoveries have helped researchers understand how the giant sloths lived. They likely moved slowly but steadily across their environment, feeding on a wide variety of plants and using their strong claws to manipulate branches and dig for food. Their bodies were covered in thick hides that may have included small bony plates embedded within the skin. This natural armor added another layer of protection against predators. Even so, the presence of giant sloths did not eliminate danger from the Ice Age landscape. Large predators continued to patrol the plains and forests, always searching for vulnerable prey. Packs of dire wolf sometimes ventured into these regions, following migrating animals or investigating unfamiliar territories. But wolves faced the same challenge as other predators when encountering a giant sloth. The animal was simply too large and too well-armed to attack easily. A pack might observe the sloth cautiously, studying its movements and searching for signs of weakness. Yet most encounters ended without violence. The wolves would eventually move on, continuing their endless search for easier prey. Across the Ice Age world, animals developed extraordinary adaptations to survive. Some grew massive horns or antlers. Some developed armor that could resist even the sharpest teeth. And others, like the giant ground sloths, evolved claws so powerful that they could stand against almost any predator. But while many creatures of the Ice Age relied on strength and defense, others relied on speed and aggression. Some of them were so powerful that even the great mammoths occasionally faced their attacks. These were the heavy armored hunters and strange beasts that lived in distant regions of the Ice Age world. Creatures whose bodies looked almost like walking fortresses. Creatures that carried weapons built directly into their bones. And among them was an animal whose tail ended in a massive spiked club, capable of striking with the force of a hammer. The frozen world of the Ice Age still held many secrets, and some of its strangest giants were only just beginning to appear. Across the endless plains of the Ice Age, the wind never truly stopped moving. It swept across the mammoth steppe in long, cold currents, carrying snow across the land and sculpting the frozen soil into pale waves that stretched far beyond the horizon. Herds of mammoths and bison moved slowly through this vast wilderness, their breath rising like mist beneath the dim winter sun. But among the many giants that roamed these frozen lands, there was another creature that few predators dared challenge. This animal was massive, heavily built, and perfectly adapted to life in the brutal cold of the Ice Age. It was the formidable woolly rhinoceros. At first glance, this rhinoceros might resemble the rhinos that still exist today in parts of Africa and Asia, yet the Ice Age version possessed features that made it uniquely suited to survive in the frozen world of the mammoth steppe. Its body was covered in thick fur. A dense undercoat trapped warmth close to the skin, while longer outer hairs protected the animal from wind and snow. Beneath that fur lay a heavy layer of fat that helped the rhinoceros endure temperatures that could plunge far below freezing. The animal's shape was powerful and compact. Its broad shoulders carried enormous strength, and its thick legs were capable of pushing through deep snow as it searched for food hidden beneath the frozen ground. But the most striking feature of the woolly rhinoceros was its horn. Rising from the front of its skull was a massive blade of keratin that could grow more than a meter in length. Unlike the curved horns of many modern rhinos, the horn of the woolly rhinoceros often appeared flattened and elongated. Scientists believe this shape helped the animal sweep away snow while searching for grasses buried beneath the surface. With powerful movements of its head, the rhinoceros could clear patches of ground where frozen vegetation waited below. During the brief summers of the Ice Age, these plains exploded with life. Grasses and hardy plants grew quickly under the long hours of northern sunlight. The woolly rhinoceros took advantage of this season, feeding constantly and building the energy reserves needed to survive the coming winter. Despite its plant-based diet, the woolly rhinoceros was one of the most dangerous animals on the Ice Age plains. Its massive horn and thick skull made it a formidable opponent for any predator. Even the famous Smilodon, with its terrifying teeth, would rarely attack a healthy adult rhinoceros. A charging rhino could easily gore a predator with its horn or crush bones with its sheer weight. For this reason, predators usually watched the rhinoceros from a distance. They studied the movements of the herds and waited for moments when weakness appeared. Sometimes an older rhinoceros became slow during the harsh winter months. Sometimes a young calf wandered too far from its mother while exploring the open plains. In those rare moments, hunters might attempt an attack. Imagine a cold afternoon on the mammoth steppe. Snow drifts slowly across the ground as a small group of rhinoceroses searches for grass beneath the frozen surface. One of the calves wanders slightly away from the others, curious about a patch of exposed ground nearby. Hidden behind a low ridge of snow and wind-carved earth, a pair of saber-toothed cats watches carefully. Their bodies remain perfectly still as they observe the herd. The young rhinoceros lowers its head to investigate the snow. The moment of opportunity arrives. The predators move quickly. They sprint across the frozen ground, their powerful muscles driving them forward with explosive speed. The young rhinoceros lifts its head in alarm and cries out, the sound echoing across the plains. The herd reacts instantly. One of the adult rhinoceroses charges forward. With terrifying force, the massive animal lowers its horn and rushes toward the attackers. The ground trembles beneath its weight. The predators hesitate. A full-grown rhinoceros is simply too dangerous. The cats quickly retreat, disappearing back into the snowy hills where they had been hiding. Across the Ice Age landscape, such moments played out again and again. Predators tested the defenses of herbivores, searching for any weakness that might lead to a successful hunt. But the rhinoceros was not easily defeated. For thousands of years, these animals thrived across the frozen plains of Eurasia, sharing the landscape with mammoths, giant deer, and countless other species. Their presence added another layer to the complex ecosystem of the Ice Age. Yet, danger did not come only from the ground. Above the plains, the sky itself sometimes held hunters. High in the cold air, enormous birds soared on wide wings, scanning the land below for signs of movement. Most birds of prey today hunt small animals, such as rodents or fish. But during the Ice Age, some species reached sizes far beyond what we see in the modern world. One of these remarkable birds was the gigantic Teratornis. With wings that could stretch more than 3.5 meters from tip to tip, this bird was among the largest flying predators to ever patrol the skies of North America. It glided effortlessly above the plains, using rising currents of air to remain aloft for hours while searching for food. Sometimes it hunted smaller animals. At other times it behaved more like a scavenger, descending upon carcasses left behind by wolves, saber-toothed cats, or other predators. The skies of the Ice Age were not empty. They were part of the same great struggle for survival that unfolded on the ground below. Every creature, whether walking across the snow or soaring high above it, played a role in the vast ecosystem of the frozen world. Yet even these enormous birds were not the most powerful rulers of the sky. Far across the oceans, on isolated islands, another predator would rise into the air with wings of astonishing strength. This hunter was capable of lifting prey heavier than any modern eagle, and when it descended from the clouds, its attack came with the speed and force of a falling spear. The age of giants was not limited to the land. Even the skies of the Ice Age had their own terrifying kings. The Ice Age was a world of giants. Across the frozen plains, enormous mammals walked through drifting snow, leaving deep tracks that froze solid in the bitter wind. Mammoths traveled in family herds. Bison gathered in vast migrations that darkened the horizon. Giant deer carried antlers like spreading forests above their heads. Predators stalked these lands constantly. Wolves hunted in organized packs. Saber-toothed cats waited patiently for the perfect moment to strike. Massive bears wandered across the tundra like living mountains. Yet while these struggles played out on the ground, another world existed above them: the sky. To animals living on the frozen plains, the sky might have seemed empty at first glance. The cold air often appeared clear and silent as pale sunlight stretched across the horizon. But high above the land, enormous wings sometimes moved through the wind. One of the great rulers of this aerial world was the impressive Pterotornis. This bird was unlike anything flying across modern skies today. With a wingspan that could stretch more than 3.5 meters, Pterotornis was among the largest birds capable of sustained flight in the prehistoric world. Its wings were long and powerful, built perfectly for gliding over great distances while searching for food. From far below, the bird might have looked like a dark silhouette drifting silently against the pale clouds. But its presence carried great significance across the Ice Age landscape. Pterotornis was both a hunter and a scavenger. Its sharp vision allowed it to detect movement on the ground from remarkable distances. Small animals moving across open grasslands could easily attract its attention. At the same time, the bird possessed a keen sense for opportunity. The frozen plains were filled with predators, and where predators hunted, carcasses inevitably appeared. When wolves or saber-toothed cats finished feeding, scraps of meat often remained behind. These leftovers were valuable resources for many animals, and Pterotornis was always watching. Imagine a group of direwolf gathered around the body of a fallen bison. Their hunt has finally succeeded after a long chase across the frozen steppe. As the wolves feed, their attention remains focused on the meal before them. Far above, unseen eyes observe the scene. The enormous bird circles slowly in the cold air, riding invisible currents of wind that lift its wings effortlessly. For long minutes, it studies the activity below, waiting patiently. Eventually, the wolves finish feeding. One by one, they drift away across the plains, leaving behind the remains of their kill. Only then does the giant bird begin its descent. Its wings tilt slightly as it glides downward. The wind whistles softly along the edges of its feathers. Within moments, the bird lands beside the carcass with a heavy but controlled movement. Now it begins its work. Its strong beak tears into the remaining flesh, while its sharp claws grip the frozen ground. In the Ice Age world, nothing went to waste for long. Every creature played a role in recycling life back into the ecosystem. But Pterotornis was not alone in ruling the skies of the prehistoric world. Far away, across the southern oceans, another bird of prey evolved into something even more formidable. This predator lived in the rugged mountains and forests of ancient New Zealand. There, isolated from many of the large mammals that dominated other continents, birds themselves became the rulers of the land and sky. Among them, rose one of the most powerful flying predators ever known, the mighty Haast's eagle. Although Haast's eagle lived primarily in regions far from the mammoth steppe, it belonged to the same era of giant animals that defined the Ice Age world, and its abilities were extraordinary. With a wingspan approaching 3 meters and powerful talons capable of delivering crushing force, this eagle was unlike any bird alive today. What made it truly remarkable was the size of the prey it hunted. Most modern eagles capture animals much smaller than themselves. Fish, rabbits, or small mammals are typical targets. Haast's eagle hunted something far larger. Its primary prey was a group of giant, flightless birds known as moas. Some species of moa could stand more than 3 meters tall and weigh over 200 kilograms. To attack such prey required incredible strength and precision. The eagle soared high above the forests and valleys, scanning the ground below with sharp eyes capable of detecting movement from extraordinary distances. When it located a suitable target, the attack began. The bird folded its wings and plunged toward the ground at tremendous speed. Its talons extended forward like hooked daggers. The impact of such a strike could deliver enormous force, capable of knocking even a massive moa to the ground. In many ways, this predator represented the aerial equivalent of the saber-toothed cats that hunted on the plains. Both relied on sudden, powerful attacks, delivered with extraordinary precision. Although Haast's eagle lived in a different part of the world, it served as a reminder that the Ice Age produced giants in nearly every corner of the planet. Not only on the land, but in the air as well. Back on the mammoth steppe, the cycle of life continued endlessly. Herds migrated across the frozen grasslands. Predators followed their movements through storms and bitter winds, and above it all, silent wings occasionally passed across the sky. Yet the Ice Age world still held creatures even stranger than giant birds and towering mammals. Some of them looked less like animals and more like living machines built from bone and armor. Creatures whose bodies were covered in protective shells stronger than most predators could penetrate. And among them was a remarkable beast that carried its own weapon at the end of its tail. A tail built not for balance, but for battle. Across the vast landscapes of the Ice Age, survival often depended on strength. Many animals grew enormous bodies to survive the cold. Thick fur protected them from icy winds. Powerful muscles allowed them to travel long distances across frozen plains in search of food. Predators evolved sharp teeth and claws to hunt the giants that roamed the land. But not every creature survived through speed or aggression. Some species followed a completely different strategy. Instead of running from danger, they carried their defenses with them wherever they went. Among the most remarkable of these animals was the extraordinary Glyptodon. At first glance, Glyptodon looked almost unbelievable. Its body resembled a massive dome of armor moving slowly across the plains. The animal was roughly the size of a small car, with a heavy shell covering nearly its entire back. This shell was not made of ordinary bone. It consisted of hundreds of tightly connected bony plates, known as osteoderms. Each plate locked together with its neighbors to create a solid protective structure that acted like a natural shield. The result was a creature that resembled a walking fortress. Its legs were thick and powerful, built to support the immense weight of its armored body. Beneath the shell was a broad, muscular frame, capable of moving steadily across the grasslands and forests of ancient South America. Unlike the mammoths and bison of the northern plains, Glyptodon lived in warmer regions where Ice Age climates were milder but still unpredictable. The landscape here included open grasslands, scattered forests, and wide river valleys that supported a variety of plant life. For a herbivore like Glyptodon, these environments provided an abundance of food. The animal spent much of its time grazing slowly across the land, feeding on grasses and low-growing vegetation. Its jaws were strong and well adapted for crushing tough plants. Despite its calm and peaceful lifestyle, Glyptodon was not defenseless. Far from it. Predators occasionally roamed these regions as well. Large cats and packs of wolves explored the same territories in search of prey. One of the hunters that might encounter such an armored giant was the powerful Smilodon. A saber-toothed cat was a formidable predator, capable of bringing down animals much larger than itself. But even such a hunter faced serious challenges when confronting a creature like Glyptodon. The animal's shell covered nearly its entire body, leaving very few vulnerable areas exposed. The head and legs were protected by thick skin and strong bones. And then there was the tail. Some species of Glyptodon possessed tails that ended in heavy, bony clubs. These clubs could swing with surprising speed and force, turning the rear of the animal into a dangerous weapon. Imagine a curious predator approaching from behind. The Glyptodon senses movement and begins to turn slowly. Its armored shell glints beneath the sunlight, while the heavy tail lifts slightly from the ground. If the predator moves too close, the tail swings. The impact could easily break bones. For most hunters, the lesson was quickly learned. Attacking such a creature carried enormous risk, with very little chance of success. As a result, predators often ignored these armored herbivores entirely. They searched instead for faster animals that relied on speed rather than armor. Yet Glyptodon was not the only armored giant that lived during the Ice Age. Another species carried this defensive strategy even further. This remarkable creature was the formidable Doedicurus. Doedicurus looked similar to Glyptodon at first glance, but it possessed one truly astonishing feature. At the end of its powerful tail was an enormous spiked club. This weapon resembled a massive mace carved from bone. Several large spikes extended outward from the club, making it capable of delivering devastating blows. Scientists believe that this weapon served both defensive and social purposes. When threatened by predators, the spiked tail could swing with tremendous force. A direct hit might shatter bones or drive away even the most determined attacker. But the tail may also have been used in contests between members of the same species. During mating seasons, males could compete for dominance, swinging their heavy clubs in controlled battles that demonstrated strength and endurance. Across the Ice Age world, such contests were common. Giant deer clashed with antlers that stretched like branches of trees. Mammoths pushed against each other with curved tusks that could weigh more than 100 kilograms. And armored giants like Doedicurus may have tested their strength through powerful swings of their spiked tails. These displays were part of the ancient language of survival. They determined which animals passed on their genes and which faded from the long story of life. Yet even the most heavily armored creatures could not escape the greater forces shaping the Ice Age. Climate changes continued to reshape the planet. Glaciers advanced and retreated across continents. Grasslands shifted into forests and then back again as temperatures rose and fell over thousands of years. Animals were forced to adapt, migrate, or disappear. Some species flourished under the harsh conditions. Others slowly vanished as their environments changed. Still, during the height of the Ice Age, the world remained filled with extraordinary life. Every region held its own giants. Every ecosystem contained predators and prey locked in an endless struggle for survival. And somewhere within this frozen world, a new participant was beginning to appear. Unlike the mammoths or giant deer, this creature did not rely on size or armor. Unlike wolves or saber-toothed cats, it did not possess claws or fangs designed for hunting. Instead, it carried something far more unusual, a mind capable of planning. hands capable of shaping tools, and a curiosity that would eventually change the fate of nearly every creature on Earth. The Ice Age was about to meet one of its most unexpected inhabitants. Across the frozen world of the Ice Age, predators ruled many of the great landscapes. Wolves hunted in organized packs across the open plains. Saber-toothed cats stalked herds of giant herbivores through tall grasses and drifting snow. Massive bears wandered the wilderness like living mountains, claiming territory wherever they traveled. But these famous hunters were not the only feline predators that lived during this ancient era. Hidden within forests, grasslands, and rocky valleys were other cats. Some were powerful rivals to the saber-toothed hunters. Others were mysterious species that modern science only began to understand through fossil discoveries. Among the most impressive of these forgotten predators was the enormous Panthera atrox. This creature was one of the largest cats that ever lived. Often called the American lion, Panthera atrox was closely related to the lions that still roam parts of Africa today, but its size surpassed nearly all modern lions. A large male could weigh more than 300 kilograms and stand powerfully built upon long, muscular legs. Its body was designed for strength and endurance, capable of dominating large prey across the grasslands and open forests of ancient North America. Unlike the saber-toothed cats with their long, curved fangs, the American lion possessed teeth similar to those of modern lions. Sharp canines and powerful jaws allowed it to deliver crushing bites to the neck or throat of its prey. The American lion likely hunted large herbivores such as bison, horses, and even young mammoths. In the wide open spaces of Ice Age North America, these predators may have traveled across vast territories following the migrations of prey animals. Some scientists believe they may have hunted alone, while others suggest they might have lived in small groups similar to modern lions. Imagine the scene on a cold evening along the edge of the mammoth steppe. A herd of bison moves slowly across the frozen grassland, their breath rising into the fading light of sunset. Nearby, hidden among scattered shrubs and snow-covered ridges, a large cat watches. Its golden eyes remain fixed on the herd. The predator moves silently through the grass, each step slow and careful. Its body stays low to the ground as it closes the distance. The moment arrives when one of the bison drifts slightly away from the others. With explosive speed, the lion launches forward. The chase erupts across the frozen plain as the herd scatters in panic. Hooves thunder against the icy soil while the powerful predator races toward its target. Sometimes the prey escapes into the safety of the herd. Sometimes the hunter succeeds. These dramatic struggles shaped the rhythm of life across the Ice Age landscape. But Panthera atrox was not the only cat that prowled the ancient world. Another mysterious predator lived across parts of Africa, Asia, and southern Europe long before the height of the Ice Age. This animal was the elusive Dinophelus. Dinophelus was smaller than the giant American lion, but still a powerful predator in its own right. It possessed moderately elongated canine teeth, though not nearly as extreme as those of the saber-toothed cats. Its body resembled a blend between a modern leopard and a powerful lynx, built for stealth and ambush within forests and wooded areas. Unlike the open grassland hunters, Dinophelus likely relied on surprise. Imagine dense vegetation along the edge of an Ice Age forest. Birds flutter between branches, while small mammals move quietly through the undergrowth. Unseen among the shadows waits the predator. Its spotted coat blends perfectly with the broken light filtering through the trees. Every muscle remains still as the animal studies its surroundings. A small herd of deer approaches the forest edge. The predator watches patiently. Seconds stretch into minutes as the cat waits for the perfect opportunity. Then, in a sudden burst of motion, it leaps forward. The forest erupts with movement as the prey attempts to escape. These swift ambush attacks allowed predators like Dinofelis to survive in environments where speed alone could not guarantee success. Across the Ice Age world, different predators developed unique strategies depending on their habitats. Some ruled the open plains. Some dominated forests and mountain valleys. Others patrolled the skies or wandered the frozen tundra in search of opportunity. Yet, despite this incredible diversity of hunters, the Ice Age ecosystem remained balanced for thousands of years. Herbivores adapted to escape predators. Predators adapted to capture them. Migration routes shifted with the seasons as animals followed the growth of grasses and plants. It was a world shaped by natural forces that had evolved over millions of years. But toward the later stages of the Ice Age, something new began to appear across these ancient landscapes. A species that did not rely on enormous size. A species that did not possess claws, fangs, or armored shells. Instead, it carried tools. It carried fire. And, perhaps most importantly, it carried the ability to work together in ways that no other predator on Earth had ever mastered. Slowly, quietly, this new species began spreading across continents, and as it moved into the territories of mammoths, giant deer, saber-toothed cats, and wolves, the balance of the Ice Age world would begin to change forever. The age of the great beasts was approaching its most important turning point. When people imagine the Ice Age, they often picture endless plains of snow and ice stretching across the continents. They imagine mammoths walking through blizzards, wolves howling beneath pale northern skies, saber-toothed cats stalking through frozen grasslands in search of prey. But the Ice Age was not only a story of the land. Beyond the frozen coasts of the continents stretched enormous oceans that were just as wild and dangerous as the tundra. Cold winds swept across dark waters. Vast fields of sea ice drifted slowly with the currents. Glaciers crept toward the sea, releasing towering icebergs that floated silently across the horizon. Beneath these cold waters lived some of the most powerful predators on the planet. One of the most remarkable marine hunters of this era was the massive Leviathan. Leviathan was an enormous whale that lived millions of years before the final stages of the Ice Age, but its presence represents the type of colossal predator that dominated ancient oceans. Its body could grow more than 15 meters long, with a skull nearly 3 meters in length. But the most astonishing feature of this whale was its teeth. Unlike modern sperm whales, which mostly feed on squid, Leviathan possessed gigantic teeth in both its upper and lower jaws. Some of these teeth were more than 30 centimeters long. They were built not for catching small prey, but for gripping and tearing apart large animals. Scientists believe Leviathan hunted other whales, making it one of the most powerful predators ever to live in the ocean. Imagine the dark depths beneath an Ice Age sea. Far below the surface, sunlight fades into a dim blue haze. The water grows colder and darker with every meter of depth. Then, a massive shadow moves silently through the water. The enormous whale glides forward with slow, powerful strokes of its tail. Its massive jaws open slightly, revealing rows of thick, conical teeth designed for crushing bone and flesh. For smaller marine animals, encountering such a predator would have been terrifying. But Leviathan was not the only giant roaming these ancient seas. Another marine hunter, far more closely connected to the Ice Age world itself, ruled the cold coastal waters of the northern oceans. This creature was the legendary Orcinus orca. Modern killer whales still patrol oceans today, But during the Ice Age, they shared the seas with many large marine animals that no longer exist. Giant seals, massive fish, and even young whales were part of the ecosystem. Orcas were perfectly designed for this environment. Their sleek, black and white bodies cut smoothly through the water. Powerful tails propelled them with incredible speed, while their intelligence allowed them to coordinate complex hunting strategies. Unlike many predators that hunt alone, killer whales worked together. Small groups called pods communicated with each other through sounds and movements that allowed them to surround prey with astonishing precision. Imagine an Ice Age coastline. A massive iceberg drifts slowly across the water, while waves break against rocky cliffs covered in snow. Near the surface of the ocean, a large seal swims cautiously through the cold water. Beneath the surface, hidden from view, several dark shapes move silently. The orcas are hunting. One whale swims below the seal, while another circles from the side. A third approaches from behind. The trap closes quickly. With sudden bursts of speed, the whales rush forward, and the prey has almost no chance to escape. These coordinated hunts made orcas among the most efficient predators in the ocean. Even today, very few marine animals dare challenge a group of killer whales. But during the Ice Age seas, other enormous creatures also roamed the cold waters. Among them were gigantic marine mammals known as Steller's sea cow. Unlike the fierce predators of the ocean, these animals were peaceful giants. Steller's sea cows could grow up to 10 meters long and weigh several tons. Their massive bodies moved slowly through shallow coastal waters where they fed on underwater plants and seaweed. They resembled enormous manatees, with thick skin and heavy bodies built for life in cold northern seas. Because they moved slowly and fed near the surface, they were vulnerable to predators. A pod of killer whales could easily overpower one of these gentle giants. Yet for thousands of years, these animals thrived along the coasts of the northern Pacific Ocean. Their presence added another layer of diversity to the Ice Age world. While mammoths and giant deer roamed the frozen land, entire ecosystems flourished beneath the waves. Fish migrated through icy currents. Seals rested on floating ice sheets. Whales traveled enormous distances across the oceans in search of food. Together, these creatures formed one of the most complex and powerful marine ecosystems in Earth's history. But just like the animals on land, the creatures of the sea were not immune to change. The climate of the planet continued to shift. Glaciers slowly advanced and retreated. Sea levels rose and fell as massive ice sheets locked away enormous amounts of water. These changes altered coastlines, currents, and marine habitats across the globe. And while these transformations unfolded across thousands of years, another force was beginning to spread along the shores of the continents. Humans. Small groups of early humans gradually explored coastlines and river valleys, learning to fish, gather shellfish, and travel across the water using simple boats. At first, they were only small participants in the vast Ice Age world, but their presence would eventually reach nearly every corner of the planet. From the frozen tundra to the deepest forests, from the open plains to the coldest oceans. The great age of Ice Age giants was slowly approaching its final chapters. For tens of thousands of years, the Ice Age world remained a land of giants. Across the mammoth steppe, enormous herds moved like slow rivers across the frozen plains. The ground trembled beneath the heavy steps of woolly mammoth as families traveled between feeding grounds buried beneath snow and ice. Nearby, towering megaloceros carried antlers that spread wider than the height of a human. Their massive silhouettes stood against the pale horizon like moving trees. Predators followed these herds endlessly. The powerful Smilodon stalked through grasslands and rocky valleys, its curved fangs designed for delivering deadly precision strikes. Packs of direwolf moved across the tundra with relentless endurance, capable of chasing prey across kilometers of open ground. Massive bears, such as Arctodus, wandered through forests and plains, towering above almost every other predator of their time. For thousands of generations, these creatures formed the foundation of an extraordinary ecosystem. Each species played its role. Herbivores shaped the landscape as they grazed and migrated. Predators controlled populations and removed the weak from herds. Scavengers cleaned the remains left behind after hunts. The balance was ancient and powerful. Yet slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the world itself began to change. The Ice Age was never a permanent state of the planet. It was part of a long natural cycle in which glaciers advanced and retreated across continents over many thousands of years. Toward the end of the last great glacial period, temperatures began to rise. The change was gradual, but its effects spread across the entire planet. Glaciers that had once covered vast regions began to melt. Massive ice sheets slowly retreated northward, revealing land that had been buried beneath ice for tens of thousands of years. As the ice withdrew, the landscape began transforming. Frozen grasslands turned into wetlands and forests. Universe shifted their paths as new valleys formed from melting glaciers. Plants that had once thrived in cold, open tundra struggled to survive in warmer climates. And when plants changed, the animals that depended on them faced new challenges. The mammoth steppe, once one of the largest ecosystems on Earth, began to shrink. Grasses that had fed enormous herds were gradually replaced by shrubs, forests, and marshes. For animals that depended on wide open grazing lands, this transformation created serious problems. The giant mammoths, perfectly adapted to cold, dry grasslands, began to lose their territory. Their migrations became more difficult as forests spread across regions that had once been open plains. The same was true for many other herbivores. The massive steppe bison had once traveled in great herds across the tundra. But as the landscape changed, their numbers began to decline. Even the enormous elasmotherium, a giant rhinoceros that may have inspired ancient legends of unicorns, disappeared as its preferred habitats vanished. Predators felt these changes as well. Hunters like Smilodon depended on large herbivores to survive. When prey animals became scarce, even the most powerful predators struggled. Direwolves faced the same problem. Without vast herds of large animals to hunt, their specialized hunting strategies became less effective. The balance of the Ice Age ecosystem began to weaken. But climate change was not the only new force shaping this ancient world. By this time, another species had spread across much of the planet: humans. Early humans had gradually expanded from Africa into Europe, Asia, Australia, and eventually the Americas. Small groups traveled across landscapes that had once been dominated entirely by wild animals. At first, their impact was limited. Human populations were small, and survival in the Ice Age environment required tremendous skill and cooperation. But humans possessed advantages that no other predator had ever developed. They could create tools from stone, bone, and wood. They could control fire. They could communicate complex ideas and plan coordinated hunts. Groups of humans working together could hunt animals far larger than any individual person. Archaeological evidence suggests that early humans hunted mammoths, bison, horses, and many other species. Sometimes these hunts were incredibly dangerous. Imagine a group of hunters facing a mammoth weighing several tons. Using spears, traps, and coordinated teamwork, they slowly forced the giant animal into a vulnerable position. The hunt required patience, courage, and careful planning. But when it succeeded, the reward was enormous. A single mammoth could provide food, clothing, tools, and shelter materials for an entire community. Humans were not the only factor affecting the fate of Ice Age animals, but their presence added new pressure to ecosystems already struggling with environmental change. Large animals tend to reproduce slowly. Many species required years before reaching maturity and producing offspring. When hunting pressure combined with shrinking habitats, populations of these giants could decline rapidly. Over time, many of the most famous creatures of the Ice Age began to disappear. First in some regions, then across entire continents. The mighty mammoths faded from much of their ancient territory. The great antlered deer vanished from European forests. Saber-toothed cats and dire wolves slowly disappeared from the fossil record. The Ice Age giants that had ruled the planet for thousands of years were approaching the end of their era. Yet their story was not simply one of extinction. Their legacy remains written in the landscapes of Earth, in the fossils preserved beneath layers of ancient soil, and in the scientific discoveries that continue to reveal their remarkable lives. But one final chapter of this story still remains. The moment when the Age of Giants finally came to an end. The great age of Ice Age giants did not end in a single moment. There was no single storm, no sudden catastrophe that erased them from the Earth. Instead, the disappearance of these remarkable animals unfolded slowly across thousands of years as the planet itself continued to transform. The glaciers that had once covered enormous regions of the northern hemisphere kept melting. Vast rivers formed from the retreating ice sheets, carving new valleys through the land. Forests expanded into territories that had once been open tundra. The mammoth steppe, once one of the largest ecosystems on Earth, gradually fragmented into smaller regions scattered across the northern continents. For the enormous herbivores that depended on this environment, survival became increasingly difficult. The mighty woolly mammoth had once traveled in great herds across the frozen plains of Eurasia and North America. Their thick fur and curved tusks made them perfectly suited for life in a world of cold winds and endless grasslands. But as forests spread across the land and temperatures rose, the mammoths began to lose the environment that had supported them for tens of thousands of years. Food sources became more scattered. Migration routes were interrupted by expanding woodlands and wetlands. Gradually, mammoth populations shrank. Some groups survived longer than others. In remote northern regions and isolated islands, small populations continued living long after the species had disappeared from most of its former range. For example, isolated groups of mammoths survived on Arctic islands thousands of years after their relatives vanished from the mainland. But even these last survivors eventually disappeared. Their era had simply come to an end. The same fate touched many of the other great animals of the Ice Age. The enormous megaloceros, whose antlers once stretched wider than any modern deer, vanished as forests replaced the open landscapes where they thrived. The powerful smilodon disappeared as the large herbivores it depended on became increasingly rare. Without massive prey animals to hunt, even the most fearsome predators could not survive. Packs of direwolf slowly faded from the fossil record as well. These wolves had evolved to hunt large Ice Age herbivores, but the changing environment favored smaller, more adaptable predators. Modern gray wolves would eventually replace them in many regions. Even the towering Arctidus, one of the largest land predators ever to walk the Earth, disappeared during this period of transition. The combination of climate change, shifting ecosystems, and growing human populations created challenges that even these giants could not overcome. Yet, while many species vanished, others adapted. Some animals found new ways to survive in the changing world. Bison continued to roam across parts of North America, though their numbers and habitats changed dramatically. Moose and elk expanded into forests that had once been too cold for them. Wolves and bears adapted to hunting different prey and living in new environments. Life continued. The Ice Age giants may have disappeared, but the ecosystems they shaped did not vanish completely. Their influence remained written across the landscapes of Earth. Grasslands still stretch across northern continents. Rivers still follow paths carved by melting glaciers. And beneath the soil, deep layers of frozen ground, known as permafrost, continue to preserve the bones, tusks, and sometimes even entire frozen bodies of animals that lived tens of thousands of years ago. Scientists today study these ancient remains to understand the lives of creatures that once dominated the planet. Through fossils, preserved footprints, and even fragments of ancient DNA, researchers are slowly reconstructing the story of the Ice Age world. Each discovery reveals new details: how mammoths migrated across continents, how saber-toothed cats hunted their prey, how enormous birds soared above the frozen plains, and how an incredible diversity of life once flourished in environments that might seem impossibly harsh to modernize. The Ice Age was not simply a time of cold temperatures. It was one of the most extraordinary chapters in the history of life on Earth, a time when evolution produced giants of astonishing size and power. Massive predators with teeth like daggers, armored herbivores that resembled living fortresses, birds with wings wide enough to shadow the ground below them, and mammals so large that their footsteps shaped the very landscapes they walked upon. Today, their world is gone. The glaciers have retreated. Forests and cities now stand where mammoths once traveled. But the story of these creatures continues to fascinate people across the world. Their fossils rest in museums. Their images appear in books, documentaries, and scientific studies. And their legacy reminds us that the planet we live on is constantly changing. Entire worlds can rise and fall over the course of thousands of years. Species appear, thrive, and eventually disappear as the environment transforms. The giants of the Ice Age may be gone, but their echoes remain. Every fossil discovered beneath ancient soil is a whisper from that lost world, a reminder of the time when enormous beasts ruled frozen continents, a time when mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant bears, and countless other creatures walked across a planet shaped by ice. And although their age has ended, the memory of that extraordinary world will never truly vanish. And so, the age of Ice Age giants slowly faded into silence. The thunder of mammoth herds no longer shakes the frozen plains. The shadows of saber-toothed cats no longer move through the tall grass. The enormous bears, the armored beasts, the giant birds of the ancient sky, all of them are gone. But their world has not vanished completely. It survives in fragments, in bones hidden beneath ancient ice, in fossils buried deep within forgotten valleys, in the quiet work of scientists who continue uncovering the lost stories of our planet. Every discovery reminds us that Earth was once a very different place, a place where giants walked the land, where predators with dagger-like teeth ruled the hunt, where entire ecosystems thrived in a world shaped by ice, wind, and endless time. And somewhere beneath the frozen ground of the north, many secrets of that ancient world are still waiting to be found. Stories that remain hidden, stories that belong to the realm of forbidden lore. If you enjoyed exploring this lost world of Ice Age giants with us, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join our journey into the mysteries of ancient history. Leave a like if this story fascinated you, and share the video with anyone who loves forgotten worlds and legendary creatures. Because here on Forbidden Lore, we uncover the stories that history almost erased. Until the next story, stay curious and keep exploring the mysteries of the past.